welcome to my YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know me, which is probably 99% of you guys, I taught myself how to sew about 1.5 years ago. I started my journey on TikTok about 1 year ago, and about 10 months ago I started my first small business. And my small business is all about recycling old clothes. So I upcycle old clothes and turn them into new, modernized, and sustainable one-of-a-kind pieces. I've been getting a lot of DMs on Instagram and on TikTok asking how I taught myself how to sew. And the truth is, I went to Canadian Tire and bought a sewing machine on sale without doing much research, went home, and the first thing I did was go onto YouTube and I searched up how to make a bodysuit, how to make a tote bag, or how to make bucket hats, and I just learn from those tutorials. I would watch the tutorial and maybe the person would be like, do a straight stitch 1/4 inch from the edge. And then I would go onto another tab and search up how to do a straight stitch, or how come my straight stitch looks like this? How can I make it look better? And that's how I slowly started learning. I was picking apart tutorials and eventually I built up enough knowledge on my own to just kind of problem solve and figure things out. So now I want to do what those creators did for me. I created a pattern. All right, let me stop you right here. I am not a professional pattern maker, therefore my pattern is not perfect. This is just what I ended up draping, making, and using throughout the entirety of this video. You guys are free to use it. It's linked down below. Just keep in mind that things may not line up perfectly and you may have to cut off excess fabric. And this pattern is for a size 10 to 12 because that was the size of my dress form. And this is my own design. I have it linked down below. You guys can use it, you can print it, make your things, tag me. I want to see what you guys are making. I also want to connect with a lot of people who are into sewing, designing, upcycling. I'm going to show you guys a mini behind the scenes of how I made the pattern, and then I will show you guys how to put the pattern together and turn it into my corset top. Without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Before we start, let me address the elephant in the room. Yes, my dress form is missing one boob. I had to put it back together with duct tape and cotton, but it worked out. I used black duct tape and I cut it into super thin strips, and I started creating the shape of what I wanted my pattern or my corset top to look like. I took some leftover scrap fabric from the dress I made for my mom's birthday last year and I started pinning it to my dress form, making sure it was super tight. Then I took a white pencil and I started tracing out the lines I made with the duct tape. Once I finished tracing out a section or a couple of sections, I'd take my scissors and start cutting along the white lines that I made. I repeated this cut and trace process until I covered all sections of my design. Before I go ahead and trace my pattern onto paper, I'm going to pin back all of my pieces to make sure that they're the correct shape. Here's what all the pieces look like, all cut out. Now I'm going to trace them onto paper. Not gonna lie, it took me a full day to make this pattern. I just wanted to make sure that all of my pieces were gonna line up pretty well. Now I'm going to cut it out so I can trace my shapes onto fabric later. Cosmo will be joining us for this next part. Now we can finally start getting our hands on this project. This is the time where you pick out whatever fabric you want to use. I'm using this floral fabric that's meant for drapery, but you can use whatever you'd like. I took my pattern and some fabric scissors and I started pinning it to the fabric. On each pattern piece, it tells you how many times you need to cut it out, and make sure you're doing it with the fabric folded, good sides touching, so that you cut out symmetrical pieces. My pieces are finally all cut out and I am ready to start sewing. Make sure you choose a colored thread that matches your fabric because we will be doing a lot of top stitching. Start pinning your pieces, good sides touching each other, and make sure you stretch out your fabric so that everything lines up pretty well. As you can see, my two pieces right here line up very well. Start sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you're gonna follow my pattern, make sure it's 1/2 inch because that's what I marked down on the pattern pieces. Now you're gonna need to grab an iron and iron down those seams. For each seam, you're gonna iron them down to one side. This is how we're gonna create the boning channels. At least this is how I did it. The only seam you're not gonna iron down to one side is the one in the very middle. You're gonna open that up down the middle and you're gonna create two separate boning channels. When pinning and sewing the cup to the corset top, you want to make sure that the middle seam lines up with the seam between the side front middle pattern piece and the front middle side pattern piece. It'll make sense once you have the pattern in front of you. Sewing bra cups can be tricky. Just go slow and make sure to pull on your fabric to make sure it's not bunching up in the wrong places, and remember to keep your 1/2 inch seam allowance in place. Remember to iron down your bra cup seams so that everything lays flat and beautiful. This is what your bodice should look like once it's all sewn together. You should have 2 of these, one for the lining and one for the shell. Remember how we ironed down our seams? Now we're going to sew them closed so that we can put our boning in later. You only need to do this step for the piece that you're going to be using for the boning. So I'm going to be putting my boning into the shell of the corset, but you can definitely do this in the lining. It's just up to you whether you want your boning to be exposed at the end or not. When sewing down your seam, you want to sew as close to the edge as possible, but make sure it's not too close to the side so that your seam comes undone. I wanted my corset top to have straps, so I ended up just using ribbon on all the raw edges so that they wouldn't fray. I burned them a little with a candle. I didn't put it directly into the flame, I just put it close enough so that the edges would melt a little bit. I pinned my ribbon where I wanted them to go. On one side of the ribbon it was more glossy and the other side was more matte. I decided that I wanted the glossy side to show, so what I did was I made sure the glossy side was facing the correct side of my corset top bodice. Now I'm going to take my lining and put it directly on top of my shell pieces, good sides touching so that the seams are facing the outside, and my ribbon is going to be sandwiched in the middle, and I'm just going to pin all along the top edge. Now for the fun part, sew along where the pins are. Don't mind me, just watching crime documentaries as I sew this corset top. Now I think I'm on day 3. Anyways, we're going to top stitch where we just sewed our lining and shell together. This just makes everything lay flat and it honestly gives it a more professional look. I did a rolled hem for the edge of my corset top. I feel like it gives it a little bit more sturdiness after I put in the grommets and the eyelets, but you could have definitely sewn it when we had sewn the top part of the corset top together. It's totally up to you. Now we're gonna cut our boning. So with the boning, you wanna cut a strip that isn't the full length of your boning channel. You want there to be a space of about 1/2 inch at the bottom so that when you sew your hem, you're not sewing on top of the plastic. And when you cut your boning, you're gonna wanna use a nail filer to just round the edges a bit so that it's not sharp and pokes through your fabric. Now to hem the bottom, you're gonna take a long strip of fabric that's about 2 inches wide and you're gonna start pinning it to your bodice, good sides touching, and you wanna leave a little bit of extra fabric at the very end of the binding. Once you've completed that, you're just gonna sew that down. Now you're going to fold over the edge of your binding towards the corset top, and with your excess fabric, you're going to roll it upwards and you're gonna pin it in place. Sorry, I'm such a potato. I don't know why I didn't check my camera angle. I know it sucks. I'm so sorry. Our last sewing step, now we're just going to sew along where the pins are. To do the lace-up closure, you're going to take your eyelets and grommets and mark down where you want them to go. Make a little hole and use your tools to hammer them in. Now for the most satisfying part, we're gonna lace up our corset top. If you enjoyed this video and you want me to make more videos like this, please let me know down below. And if you do end up using my pattern and you post about it, please tag me on social media because I want to see. My Instagram and my TikTok are linked down below. And if there's anything you want to see me try creating, just send me a message. I love a good challenge. This is for you.